the first thing, and this interests me because I actually drink pomegranate juice pretty regularly.
We're trying to beat everybody to the punch on this one because we know we're going to get questions. I mean, we'll have one submitted to the podcast or we'll have some discussion on the forum. So maybe we can preempt that and offer some information before this all starts to fly.
So there's some research out there that pomegranate extract can improve performance.
Supposedly, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to dive into it?
Yeah, so the study, super new this year, 2019, Torgrosso maybe, and Garcia, randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled, balanced, crossover. So, everything you want to see in a trial so you can maybe lend it a bit of credence. And they're touting exercise performance improvement, post-exercise recovery, and force restoration, all due to ingesting, in this case, pomegranate extract. So we're not talking seeds, we're not talking juice, we're talking pill form extract. So they took 26 amateur male cyclists riding at least 2 to 4 sessions a week, gave them a couple 375 milligram caplets per day over 15 days. Then they did a 14-hour washout. And then these are groups of 2, by the way, 14-day washout, got out of their system, and then flip-flopped. So the guys who got the placebo now got the actual pomegranate extract, and vice versa. And for what it's worth, the extract it's made by a company called Euromed, and it's called Pomenox. I don't think we can get it in the States. So bully Europeans.
Have you ever seen pomegranate extract at stores? I never have.
Oh, no. There's some on the way, gents.
Okay, really?
I read ahead and I ordered some
from
not this
Euromed?
company, no, but
a different one.
Okay, well, if you're in Europe, like I said, bully for you. You've got easier access to this than we do.
Cool.
And so their Euromed's claims are improved circulation and endothelial function, much like we talked about with beet juice, where it opens the blood vessels to the point where more blood flow, more oxygen delivery. Modulation of vascular inflammation, so less inflammation of those very same blood passages, counteracts oxidative damage, pretty much like any antioxidants do, prebiotic effects, anti-fatigue effects, and interestingly, improvement of hair health.
Hey, Jonathan.
I'm telling you,
that's why it looks so beautiful.
thicker strands, denser. I mean,
there we go.
So why not? Why not throw that in there?
It all makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, and then it activates the whole nitric oxide synthase pathway. So again, along the lines of beetroot juice. Though this study, I think they said they don't attribute these performance improvements to this particular aspect of it, more to the flavonoids or the polyphenols. So anyway, this study's claim, so no longer Euromed, now back to the study, greater time to exhaustion and time to reach VT2. So all they're saying there is greater time to exhaustion, and I always struggle with that one because that's so subject to motivation. I mean, you tell someone, we need you to ride for 20 minutes, they'll make it happen. You tell them there's an extra $100 in it for every minute they last past 20 minutes, and this has been used. They'll do it. They'll make it happen. Yeah. So I struggle with the whole time to exhaustion testing as a measure of performance improvement. Yeah. However, time to ventilatory threshold 2, basically lactate threshold or functional threshold power, is a little more legit in my eyes.
And on that point too, the TTE, time to exhaustion, since it is placebo-controlled and double-blind, that does, I think, it makes it a little bit better.
It stands up a little better, for sure. For sure. I still think it's just a little too influenced by your psychological state. Yeah. And then it might improve max power after prolonged submax riding. So you work at submaximal, sub-threshold riding for a long time, and you still have a good punch at the end of it due to this. And it might restore...
at the end of a race.
Exactly, yeah. And it might restore force in damaged muscles, kind of along the same lines. But like I said, not necessarily due to the nitrate content so much as the polyphenol content. So regardless, I mean, if there is a performance improvement to be had, you can bet Nate's going to exploit it, which is fair.
So we will have a tart cherry pomegranate beet cocktail, basically, that we'll take in.
No, they'll be all in my office.
I feel like we're missing
Throw
chocolate
some dark
milk
chocolate too. Yeah. And we'll have it all, and it'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I think a lot of people don't understand, or maybe they've heard the term, but they don't know, what does double-blind study mean?
Neither the people conducting the experiment nor the subjects of the experiment know which modification or...
what's being served.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's for, sometimes the study person, even though they don't want to tell something, you can just see on their face, they know that something's going to happen.
And something it's hard to blind the subjects. I mean, you can't, like if you're giving them Coca-Cola versus something that doesn't contain sugar and caffeine, it's hard to match them such that, anyone who drinks, this is a bad example probably, but anyone who drinks Coca-Cola is going to get a taste of that placebo and go, that's not Coke. I know I'm not in the Coke group.
Yeah. Whenever there's like a product being tested or a product So if there's a study that supports a specific product,
Well, that's
and
the
when
other
it
thing, the
says
bias.
when it doesn't say double blind, I pretty much disregard it because
Yeah.
who knows what could go on there. And of course,
But I mean, you need someone to fund these studies. So if it is,
Yep.
you know, if a hydration study is funded by Gatorade, you can't automatically discount
Totally.
it because
Yeah.
yeah.
And then the placebo is, you know, the famous sugar pills, or they'll give them some kind of other pill. And they usually say in the study what they gave them, but sometimes it's maybe
they described it. I didn't note it, but
maybe it's a sugar pill actually. And then so
Maybe.
you don't even know if you're taking that or if someone else is taking it. And sometimes too there's probably not carbohydrates in this, but they'll match the carbohydrates because they're testing something else.
Yeah, they try to keep everything as controlled as possible, so that the only real intervention or the only difference between the two is exactly what they're trying to measure.
So it's new. I'd like to see this, you know, repeated multiple times. But it's really cool too that they switched the group after 14 days.
Yeah, I like that.
And the nice thing is, at least on Amazon, I don't have this brand, but in the States, it's pretty cheap. It was like 1,000 milligram tablets for like 90 of them was $20 or something.
Oh, that is pretty cheap.
So that would be 90 days for $20.
Sure,
That's
if the
good.
quality,
If the quality, you don't know what the quality is, but yeah, that's why there's some on the way. So if you'd like some,
right.
I don't think it'll hurt. And two antioxidants inside of this. Most likely, there's a lot of evidence that antioxidants prevent cancer and are just good for your health
Just
in general.
reduce oxidative damage, yeah.
Probably not doing damage unless, are we going to cover the antioxidants and training thing today?
I don't think we're
directly.
today.
No,
Not specifically.
We'll
Yeah.
cover it another time.
Yeah. So this helps. We talked about beet juice last week, and we have no clue if these things counteract each other and everything else. But this is actually something that I have used. I've used pomegranate juice to smooth out the taste of beet juice if I want. It's a really good way to kind of smooth it out.
Yeah, I actually saw mention of someone else doing that very thing.
Yep. Yeah. So little did I know I was ahead of the curve.
When we go on trips, we buy tart cherry juice, and now we're going to also buy pomegranate juice.
Yeah.
Which is fine to me because they're both delicious.
Aren't
So,
they? Yeah, they're awesome. Love them. So along these lines, and we're talking, I guess, research, and we're talking things that happen in the body at this level. We've been talking about something, or you actually shared some information that you came across.
Yeah, it's another new study.
Yep. And
Quite
it was
new.
fascinating to me because it really answered like two questions that I've thought about. It's going to take us a while to get to those
it
questions.
provides some food for thought. Doesn't necessarily answer them, but you know, we're testing a hypothesis, you know, and it's encouraging for sure.
Yeah.
And some of the findings are absolutely encouraging, pretty much undeniable.
So it really digs into, it's talking about like muscle growth, I guess, in
Kind
some
of muscle memory,
respects.
more specifically.
Yeah. So
muscle growth.
let's dig into it. We'll get to the takeaways in a bit here, but
So-
let's just dig in.
We've been trying to weave this topic into, because we've had questions that this would be an awesome topic to use as an answer,
Yeah.
but we just haven't gotten one of those. And
No.
we keep holding it off week after week. And now it's like, finally, we're not getting the question that's working perfectly. So we're just going to talk about it.
You can submit those, TrainerRoad.com/podcast. We get a ton of questions every week. It's awesome. Continue to do that. They're particularly good
ask
this
them?
week.
Do you want me to ask the question?
Do you know what the question is?
I can ask a question. I think we'll relate to this.
Okay,
I
sure.
used to be a high-level racer
Yeah.
back when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I've been on the couch for 10 years. Can I ever get back to that high level?
Heck
How
yes,
long
you
does
can.
it take? Go for it.
Not very,
go,
not
Nate.
very.
There we go.
Relatively. Okay, so the whole idea of use it or lose it, you've heard that for some time, right? You don't train, you lose your fitness, and to a large extent, that's true. So detraining comes with detraining comes deconditioning. I mean, you can't stay fit by doing nothing. No shocking insights there. What is interesting though is what they used to think that when muscle's wasted, the whole muscle goes, and now we're finding that most of the muscle, or the muscle fiber in this case, does, but in fact the nucleus does not. And this has some serious impacts. So first, let's just touch on muscle growth. Just a quick 101 sort of refresher, or probably new information for a lot of people. And for the true muscle physiology experts out there, forgive me, I'm sure I'm not going to get this 100% right, but I have a pretty good grasp on this stuff. So if you think of a muscle cell, first off, they can be really long. I mean, if you think of just the sartorius, so it's a muscle that starts at your hip, rolls down your thigh, and then hooks onto your tibia, so it crosses the knee. I mean, this is a long muscle. That's each that muscle is composed of single fibers. So those are hugely long fibers. So the idea of a single nucleus, and nucleus being the control center of the cell, right, contains, it's basically responsible for protein synthesis in the case of muscles. It controls all the genetic information. I mean, it's basically the brain of each muscle fiber. The idea of just one nucleus for a fiber that long, it just doesn't sound right. And in fact, it's not. When it comes to muscle fibers, they are multinucleated. They have many muscle nuclei. And then supposedly muscle cells can't divide, and this is still somehow a contentious topic, and I can't. Every time I start to dig into it, I just emerge more confused. So maybe you can get more muscle fibers, maybe the muscle fibers just get fatter, maybe there's a combination of the two. It doesn't really matter as long as I get stronger. That's all I really care about.
Yeah.
Within each muscle fiber, we have a bunch of nuclei now, nucleus plural, nuclei. And on the outside of the muscle, we have satellite cells. So these are basically stem cells that when the muscle is injured, when we do any form of training, whether there's oxidative damage or for sure muscle tearing, microtraumas, these cells split and they donate nuclei. So basically, they're helping your muscle become larger and stronger and more capable. So stem cells, basically, on the outside of the muscle, and this increases your work capacity, whether it's strength or endurance or any combination thereof. So what we're getting at here is muscle trauma and inflammation are what invoke this whole process. So this is a necessary part of training. We have to basically hurt ourselves in order to inspire adaptation. So damage, whether it be oxidative or actual damage to the muscles, micro tears, leads to inflammation. Inflammation leads to satellite cell activity. These satellite cells lead to improved performance gains, aka adaptations, or more simply just growth. Muscle growth. And we'll talk a little more on this later, not much. Gene expression folds into all of this.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. So another term to throw at you is syncytia. So muscle fibers roll in certain organs and I should say cells, and muscle fibers, certain organs, et cetera. The cells reside so closely together they're effectively fused and they behave as a single fiber. So we don't really call it like a single muscle so much as a syncytium or a syncytia. Okay. So it's just another term that kind of folds into this whole thought process. So you take many uninuclear cells, and if they're stacked closely together and they work together, they effectively become a multinuclear cell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but in the case of muscle fibers, they actually are multinucleated. So, but in any case, nuclei, hugely important to the growth of whatever, organ, muscle tissue, anything.
Awesome.
So the assumption was that when our muscle fibers atrophied, the nuclei died too. We found out that's not the case. The nuclei that they saw in the dead muscle fibers weren't actually nuclei that belonged to the muscle fibers, but belonged to other inflammatory, other cells. So now they died the muscle fibers, and they saw, oh no, the muscle nuclei these dead nuclei aren't the muscle nuclei. The muscle nuclei are still intact.
So when you're talking about a person that like detrains basically because they haven't been training for a while, this is what you're talking about with atrophy.
Exactly. So so most of the muscle is gone, but the nuclei are still there. So the brain of the muscle fiber is still residual. It's hanging in there. It's part of the syncytium. So the fiber's gone, but this whole muscle syncytia, is that the word? It's still there. So we still have all these many little brains, even though they're not really responsible for anything just now. And supposedly they have a half-life of about 15 years. That's a heck of a long time. Yeah. So you think you can only get, how detrained can you get over 15 years? And that's just half the loss. Then, if you have any understanding of how half-lives work, then half of that takes another 15 years, et cetera. So they effectively are more or less permanent. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super crazy. So, that explains why when like a pro cyclist who has been retired for a long time shows up and he does a ride. Like we've had that a number of times.
Yeah, you say it all the time. You're like, how is he was basically on the couch 2 months ago and now he's banking us. How do you go from being so slow to so fast in such a narrow length of time?
Yeah, they're overweight. They don't look like the cyclists they once were.
And in some cases still overweight and out racing us.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're saying here, you want to go through I think you go through the takeaways. I have a question.
But let's hit the takeaways and then you can hit me with those questions. So basically all this is saying is that fitness reacquisition, or what we've termed muscle memory over the years, is easier if you had it at some point. So long as you had it earlier in life, it's a lot easier to reestablish it. So you're never really restarting from scratch as long as it was there at one point. And then more and faster muscle growth takes place upon retraining. So you can almost bank muscle. If you think of a teenager hitting the gym real hard and then having a 5-year hiatus from training and then getting back into it, that teenager has effectively banked muscle mass for later use once he or she resumes training. Pretty cool. It also has impacts for adults looking at, eventually, if we're fortunate enough, we'll become elderly folks. So even if you weren't an active teenager, be active as an adult, even if no one anticipates this, but even if you're going to have a hiatus from working out for a good long while, bank that muscle when you're maybe 30 so that when you're 80, there's something to call upon. And it's worth noting that as you age, your ability to generate new muscle nuclei declines. So get them while you can.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then this also means, and this is kind of a bummer, but people who abuse metabolic steroids and testosterone amongst them have an unfair advantage potentially for life.
Yes. This gets me upset because people who people who have doped before, and they have like a certain amount of time off, and this happens too in all sports, especially with sports with in competition testing only. Like this is just in the same year. You go for like 8 months of whatever, and then you go get tested and you're totally clean.
Yeah.
But you have it for
the impacts
15 years for the half-life.
Yeah.
So you've seen some of these people who are in or who have raced in the doping era,
right?
And some of them got caught, some didn't, and they're not guilty if they didn't get caught.
But they're still riding that wave.
I know.
Yeah.
And they win things.
And from like a bodybuilding perspective or a strength perspective, guys who abuse anabolic steroids, that's where if hyperplasia, the increase in actual number of fibers, if it's there, there is an agreement somewhat of a consensus on the fact that steroids do lead to hyperplasia. You can get more muscle fibers if you utilize steroids. So whether or not that's fully accurate, I'm not here to argue.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
It's totally frustrating.
Okay, so one more little point, and then we can talk about questions. But so this is all good and fine for muscle, which whether it's slow twitch, mid twitch, fast twitch, it's all important, and we all want more of it, or at least greater capability within the stuff that we're already packing around. But on the mitochondrial side, so the aerobic respiration side, us as endurance athletes, super concerned with how many mitochondria we're packing around in each of our muscle cells. More nuclei might influence these mitochondrial adaptations. So during detraining, you lose your mitochondria, but your nuclei are still there, and they contain that genetic information for formation of new mitochondria. So the information is still there. The cell's still predisposed to produce more mitochondria than it would in someone who never really established that high mitochondrial content in the first place.
This is why what you're saying is if you had a high level of fitness before, you ramp up really quickly.
Both with endurance and strength.
And I think the good takeaway is like the work you're putting in now, whatever age, you're going to be able to bank on that for many, many years.
That's what we're finding. How exciting is that?
The elderly thing is awesome too, because that's I've had my grandpa, he fell. Like, as you get older, you have problems and you can fall.
Sarcopenia.
And that can put you in a home or really hurt your life and stuff.
Yeah, and on top of it, I mean, you as an elderly person, you fall, you break a hip or something due to lack of muscular control, then you go to the hospital, and any number of things can happen
it's
in a hospital. It's something to be avoided for sure, if at all possible. And here's one way to do it.
So there's the very negative side of the fact that if a person artificially improves their performance with any sort of performance enhancing drug, sure, they can have those benefits, but
lifetime ban.
You can, there we go. But you can also say that if a person has done this, absolutely, in a legal and fair manner, that they're still going to get those benefits. So like focusing in on that, that is awesome for us, average folks that are listening to this that are training now. It's something that should motivate you to continue to be fit for a good amount of time.
Motivate you to tell your kids to be fit. Tell your teenage sons and daughters to hit the gym, to pick a sport, to do something to establish some of these habits too. But some of these, mitochondria and cell myonuclei.
That's the other takeaway. Like when you're young, you have an opportunity to really, really.
The hormones are flowing. I mean, you're in a state where you can produce a whole relatively more nuclei than you can as you get older. Certainly when you're elderly. Yeah.
So like when you are young, that is the time to make sure that, and honestly, just make sure that if you have kids and that sort of thing, if you can help them to just do those fun, active things, it'd be awesome. It also makes a lot of sense because you see people that were, I don't know, a kid that really liked rock climbing or soccer or something when they were young and they were a teenager.
They're good athletes throughout life.
And they end up being a good athlete and pretty versatile.
So I did marching band. Does that?
There's some endurance incorporated there.
There's some endurance.
Sure.
There's some endurance in that for sure.
Not really, but okay. Thanks, guys.
More than riding the couch.
My nephew does it. He's a drummer in a band. They even went to the Rose Parade and did that sort of stuff. And it actually is from what I've talked to him, it's pretty hard actually.
Yeah, it's not like cycling.
No, it's not.
We were not elite athletes.
Still just the same.
I would consider that more athletic than maybe bowling or golf.
Yeah,
At least in
sure.
terms of adaptation.
Yeah. It's certainly more athletic than sitting on the couch playing video games, which is what a bunch of them do. So,
and two people who maybe need to do a comeback. Older people,
no,
as in Chad,
this totally struck a chord. I mean, as soon as I saw that, especially from the mitochondrial side, because I saw the muscle adaptation, I thought, oh man, that makes sense. Because I lifted a lot as a junior high schooler and college student, and now it's really easy for me to grow my strength in a relatively short period of time. And then I read the mitochondrial findings, like, oh no, this means I can actually get fit again on the bike. I basically thrown in the towel. Now I'm thinking maybe I'll get back in the ring.
I think what this study shows too is that, like, we've all felt this, that people who used to be fit can get fit again quickly. But it's good to see it like it's not bro science, it's actual science.
Yes.
So the other part is that going out into elderly age, that is such a cool finding.
The impacts on not just longevity. I mean, all these longevity studies don't sit well with me because they're talking about just people living longer. They could be on upteen medications. Their quality of life could be total garbage, but they make it to 90 years of age. I don't care. I'd rather die at 70 and be healthy and thriving the whole time than suffer the last 20 or 30 years of my life because I'm a health mess.
Nate wants to live till he's 150.
At least.
Yeah, and I'm sure you want to do it in a high quality.
That's why we got pomegranate pills coming.
That's going to carry us there.